The crowd parted like dirty water around a rock, and Elena Marlowe hit the platform boards hard. Blood soaked through her torn wedding dress. Someone else's dream stitched into ivory silk, now shredded by men who'd taken everything but her breath. The station master wouldn't meet her eyes. A woman clutched her child closer, as if damage were contagious. Elena's vision blurred, the Arizona sun turning everything white and merciless, and she thought, "This is how I disappear." Then a shadow fell across her face, and a voice cut through the whispers like steel through rope. "She's with me." If you're watching from somewhere out there in this wild world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. I want to see just how far this story can travel. The man who spoke didn't ask permission. Jace Callahan bent low, his calloused hand steadying Elena before she could collapse completely. His grip was firm but careful, like he'd handled plenty of things that might break. Up close, he smelled of leather and dust and something clean. Soap, maybe, or just the kind of work that kept a man too tired for vice. "Easy," he said. "Don't try to stand yet." Elena's breath came shallow. Her ribs screamed where they'd been kicked. The dress, God, the dress, clung to her like a shroud, heavy with road dirt and shame. She tried to pull away, but her legs had quit on her somewhere between the canyon and the station, and all she managed was a weak twist that sent fresh pain singing through her shoulder. "I don't," her voice cracked. "I don't need—" "Wasn't asking what you need." Jace straightened, scanning the crowd with eyes the color of winter iron. "Anybody here know this woman?" Silence. A few people shuffled back. One man, thick through the middle, wearing a shopkeeper's apron, cleared his throat but said nothing. Jace's jaw tightened. Figured. He turned to the station master, a wiry man named Hewitt, who'd been pretending to check the schedule board for the last 2 minutes. "She came in on the noon stage?" Hewitt glanced over, then away. "Stage didn't make it. Bandits hit 'em 6 miles out, near Devil's Bend. Driver came through about an hour ago, said they took the strong box, and, well," he gestured vaguely at Elena, "left her walking. Driver say anything else?" "Said she was traveling alone. No husband, no kin waiting." Hewitt's tone carried an edge, like that explained everything. Jace stared at him until the smaller man looked down. Then he crouched again, meeting Elena's gaze. "Can you tell me your name?" She blinked. The question felt absurd, like he'd asked her to recite poetry while the world burned. But his face was patient, waiting, and something about that steadiness made her throat loosen. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Marlowe." "All right, Miss Marlowe. I'm taking you somewhere safe. You can argue with me later if you want, but right now you're going to let me help you stand, and we're going to walk out of here." "I can't." "You can." He said it like a fact, not encouragement. "One step. That's all. Then another. Come on." She didn't know why she believed him. Maybe because everyone else had already written her off, and his certainty felt like the only solid thing left in the world. She nodded, just barely, and let him pull her upright. The pain was immediate and vicious. Her vision swam, black spots crowding the edges, but Jace's arm locked around her waist and held her steady. The crowd watched in silence as he guided her toward a wagon parked near the livery. Every step felt like walking on broken glass, but she kept moving because stopping meant collapsing, and collapsing meant proving them all right. When they reached the wagon, Jace eased her onto the bench seat like she weighed nothing. He pulled a blanket from the back, rough wool, smelling of horse and hay, and draped it over her shoulders. "Wait here," he said, then walked back toward the platform. Elena sat trembling, clutching the blanket. She watched him approach Hewitt again, saw the two men exchange words she couldn't hear. Hewitt's expression shifted from discomfort to outright alarm. He shook his head. Jace leaned in, said something low and clipped, and Hewitt's mouth snapped shut. A woman's voice cut through the murmur. "Jace Callahan, what in heaven's name do you think you're doing?" Elena turned. The speaker was tall, sharp-featured, dressed in dark blue with a cameo brooch at her throat. She stood with the rigid posture of someone used to being obeyed. Jace didn't look at her. "Taking care of business, Mrs. Garrison." "That is not business. That is a strange woman in a ruined dress, and you're making a spectacle." "Then stop watching." Mrs. Garrison's eyes narrowed. "People will talk." "Let 'em." "She could be anyone, a criminal, She's hurt." Jace finally turned, and his voice dropped to something colder. She's hurt and alone. And if you're so concerned about what people think, maybe worry less about me and more about what it says when a whole town watches a woman bleed and does nothing. Mrs. Garrison's face flushed, but she held her ground. I'm only saying what others are thinking. I know exactly what others are thinking. That's the problem. He moved past her without waiting for a reply, returning to the wagon. Elena stared at him as he climbed up beside her. You didn't have to. Yeah, I did. He took the reins, clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. You got anywhere to go? The question hit harder than it should have. Elena looked down at her hands, scraped, dirty, still shaking. I was supposed to meet someone. In Prescott. Husband? No. A man I was meant to marry. The words tasted like ash. Arrangement. My father made it before he died. Jace said nothing for a moment, guiding the wagon onto the main road leading out of town. The sun hammered down, and the dust rose in pale clouds behind them. You still want to go to Prescott? He asked finally. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of Richard Drummond, 43 years old, owner of a dry goods concern, a man she'd never met but whose letters had been polite and businesslike and utterly devoid of warmth. She thought of arriving there now, bruised and dishonored, her dress torn, her belongings stolen. She thought of his face when he saw her. No, she said quietly. I don't think I do. All right then. That was it. No questions, no judgment, just acceptance. They rode in silence for a while, the town shrinking behind them. The landscape opened up, red rock and scrub brush, cottonwoods clustered near a dry creek bed, mountains rising distant and hazy in the west. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Elena had never seen anything like it. Where are we going? She asked. My ranch, about an hour north. You need a doctor, and there's only one in Red Ridge, old man named Pritchard. He'll come out to the ranch tomorrow morning. I don't have money to pay. Didn't ask. Elena bit her lip. Why are you doing this? Jace kept his eyes on the road. Because nobody else was. It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was honest. She settled back against the seat, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. Her body hurt everywhere, and beneath the pain was something worse, a deep, cold fear that she'd never be clean again. That what happened in that canyon had marked her permanently. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, Jace was shaking her shoulder gently. We're here. Elena opened her eyes. The ranch sat in a shallow valley, sheltered by low hills. The house was timber and stone, simple but well built, with a wide porch and shutters painted dark green. A barn stood off to one side, corrals beyond that, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. It's not much, Jace said, but it's solid. He helped her down, and she swayed on her feet. He caught her again, patient, and guided her up the porch steps. Inside, the house was cool and dim. The main room held a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a few chairs. Everything was clean but spare. No curtains, no rugs, nothing decorative. Bedroom's through there, Jace said, nodding toward a doorway. You can rest. I'll get water heating for a bath. Elena stared at him. You live here alone? Yeah. Then where will you... I'll sleep in the barn. Don't worry about it. I can't take your bed. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Go on. Sit down before you fall down. She obeyed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm, the quilt faded but clean. Jace disappeared, and she heard him moving around. The clank of metal, the splash of water, the scrape of wood on stone as he fed the stove. When he returned, he carried a basin and a cloth. He set them on the small table beside the bed. For your face, he said. I'll bring the bath in a few minutes. You need help getting that dress off? Elena's cheeks burned. No, I can manage. He nodded and left, pulling the door almost closed behind him. Alone, she looked down at herself. The dress was ruined beyond saving, torn at the shoulder, stained with blood and dirt. She fumbled with the buttons, her fingers clumsy and weak. It took forever, but finally she got it open and let it slide to the floor in a heap of soiled silk. Underneath, her chemise was nearly as bad. Bruises covered her ribs, her arms. She pressed the damp cloth to her face and felt the sting of split skin at her temple. The water in the basin turned rust-colored. A soft knock. Baths ready? Jace carried in a tin tub, steam rising from the water. He set it down without looking at her, then brought in 2 more buckets and poured them in. Soap's on the shelf, he said. I'll be outside. Holler if you need anything. Then he was gone. Elena stared at the tub. The water looked impossibly clean. She stripped off the rest of her undergarments and stepped in, hissing as the heat hit her bruises. But then she sank down, and the warmth surrounded her, and for the first time since the bandits had dragged her off the stage, she felt almost safe. She washed slowly, carefully. The soap was plain lye, harsh but effective. She scrubbed until her skin was raw, trying to wash away the memory of rough hands and mocking laughter, trying to scrub herself clean. It didn't work. It never would. But the trying mattered. When the water started to cool, she climbed out and dried herself with a towel Jace had left folded on a chair. There was a nightshirt there too, men's, far too big, but soft from wear. She put it on and rolled up the sleeves. She opened the door. Jace sat at the table mending a bridle. He looked up. Better? Yes, thank you. He nodded. You should eat something. Got stew left from yesterday. I'm not hungry. Yeah, I figured. Eat anyway. He stood and ladled stew into a bowl, set it in front of her with a hunk of bread. Go on? Elena sat. The stew was simple. Beef, potatoes, carrots, but it was hot and well seasoned. She ate mechanically, her stomach reluctant but her body desperate. Jace went back to his mending, giving her space. What happened out there? He asked after a while. If you can talk about it. Elena set down her spoon. We were 6 miles out of Redridge, 5 men, masked. They stopped the stage, took the strongbox, searched the passengers. They found my trunk, my mother's jewelry, some money, letters. They laughed, said I was too pretty to waste on some old man in Prescott. Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. They dragged me off the stage. The driver tried to stop them, and they hit him, hard. I thought they'd killed him. Then they took me into the canyon. Jace's hand stilled on the leather. They didn't do everything they could have, Elena whispered. But they did enough. When they were done, they left me there, told me to walk back if I wanted to live. So I did. Silence filled the room. Jace's face was unreadable, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the bridle. You see their faces? He asked quietly. No, they wore bandanas. Hear any names? One of them called another Cal. That's all. Jace nodded slowly. I know who they are. Elena looked up sharply. You do? Pretty sure. Gang's been operating out of Devil's Bend for about 6 months. Sheriff won't touch him. Says he doesn't have jurisdiction outside town limits, which is horseshit, but nobody's pushed him on it. He set the bridle aside. They usually just take money. What they did to you? That's different. What will you do? Depends. First thing is getting you healed up. Then we'll see. I don't want... Elena swallowed. I don't want anyone else getting hurt because of me. This isn't because of you. It's because of them. Jay stood, walked to the window. They made a choice. Now they get to live with what comes next. There was something final in his tone, something that made Elena's chest tighten. She looked at him, this stranger who'd scooped her up off the platform, who'd defied a whole town's judgment, who'd given her his bed and his food and asked for nothing in return. Why? She asked again. Why help me? Jace was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. 5 years ago, my wife was traveling back from Tucson. Stage got held up. Bandits took everything, including her. By the time I found her, he stopped. She didn't make it. Elena's breath caught. I wasn't there, Jace continued. I was here, working, thinking she was safe. I didn't know until 2 days later. And by then it was too late. He turned to face her, and his eyes were hollowed out with old grief. So when I saw you on that platform, and I saw everyone turning away, I thought, not again. Not if I can help it. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry, for your wife. Me too. He moved toward the door. Get some rest, Miss Marlowe. Doctor will be here early. He left before she could say anything else. Elena sat alone in this quiet house, listening to the wind outside. She thought about the woman who'd lived here before her, whose death had carved something permanent out of Jace Callahan. She thought about the life she'd been traveling toward, loveless, obligatory, safe, and the life she'd stumbled into instead. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time since her father died, she wasn't facing it alone. Tab. Morning came too soon. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the window and pain radiating through every inch of her body. She sat up slowly, biting back a groan. The smell of coffee drifted in from the main room. She stood, steadied herself, and shuffled to the door. Jace was at the stove frying eggs. He glanced over. "You sleep?" "Some." "Pritchard'll be here within the hour. Sit down." She obeyed, and he set a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, toast. She ate while he poured coffee, strong and black. "I'll need to send word to Prescott," Elena said. "Mr. Drummond will be expecting me." "You want to go there?" She hesitated. "No, but I should tell him I'm not coming. I can have a telegram sent. You don't owe him more than that." Elena looked down. "He paid for my travel. And bandits took it. That's not your fault." Jace leaned against the counter. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving." The words settled over her like a weight lifting. She nodded. A knock sounded at the door. Jace opened it to reveal an older man carrying a black leather bag. Dr. Pritchard, gray-haired and stooped but sharp-eyed. "Jace," he said, "heard you picked up a stray." "Don't call her that." Pritchard raised an eyebrow but stepped inside. "Miss, I'm going to need to examine you. Make sure nothing's broken. Check those bruises." Elena nodded. Jace moved toward the door. "I'll be outside," he said. The examination was thorough and uncomfortable. Pritchard poked and prodded, asked questions, made notes. Finally, he sat back. "You're lucky," he said. "Cracked rib probably, but nothing worse. Bruises'll heal. That cut on your head is clean, won't scar much. But you need rest. Real rest. No riding, no heavy work, not for at least 2 weeks." "I don't have 2 weeks," Elena said. "I need to—" "You need to heal." Pritchard's tone was firm. "Otherwise you'll make things worse. Jace, you keeping her here?" "Yeah." "Good. I'll check on her in a few days." He stood, packing his bag. "Miss, you survived something most people wouldn't. Give yourself time." After he left, Elena sat in silence. Jace came back in, looked at her. "What'd he say?" "Rest, 2 weeks." "All right, then you rest." "I can't stay here that long. It's not... People will talk." "Let 'em." Jace poured himself more coffee. "You're staying until you're well enough to decide what comes next. And before you argue, I'm not asking." Elena wanted to protest, but the truth was she had nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no prospects. She was adrift, and Jace's ranch was the only solid ground in sight. "I'll work," she said. "I can cook, clean, keep accounts. I won't be a burden." "You're not a burden." "I will be if I just sit here." Jace studied her. "You want to help, fine. But not until Pritchard says you can. Deal?" "Deal." Over the next few days, Elena began to understand the rhythm of the ranch. Jace rose before dawn, worked until dark, mending fences, tending cattle, fixing equipment. He was methodical, quiet, competent. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words mattered. Elena spent her time resting, as ordered, but she watched. She saw how he organized his supplies, how he kept records in a battered ledger, how he rationed his resources. The ranch was small but well run, a testament to stubborn persistence. On the 4th day, she felt strong enough to sit at the table and sort through his paperwork. The ledger was a mess, entries out of order, calculations smudged, whole pages missing. When Jace came in for supper, she looked up. "Your bookkeeping is terrible." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so. You've got expenses listed under income, dates wrong, and I think you forgot to record an entire cattle sale." "Probably." He sat down. "Never was good with numbers." "I am." Elena tapped the ledger. "Let me fix this." Jace considered. "You sure?" "It'll give me something to do besides sit here going crazy." "All right, have at it." So she did. Over the following days, Elena reorganized the ledger, creating new categories, correcting errors, tracking expenses. It was meticulous work, but it felt good, productive, useful. She wasn't just recovering, she was contributing. Jace noticed. One evening, he looked over her shoulder at the neat columns of figures. "That's, a lot better," he admitted. You were losing money and didn't even know it, Elena said. That feed supplier's been overcharging you for months. Jace's jaw tightened. I'll have words with him. I already sent a letter, showed him the discrepancies. He replied today, apologized, credited your account. Jace stared at her. You did that? You're helping me. I'm helping you. That's fair. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or respect. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it is. 2 weeks passed. Pritchard returned, examined Elena again, and pronounced her healed enough for light work. The bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows, the cut on her head nothing but a thin pink line. You're tougher than you look, Pritchard said. Elena smiled faintly. I'm learning that. That night, she and Jace sat on the porch as the sun went down, painting the sky orange and red. The air was cooling, crickets starting their evening song. I sent the telegram, Jace said. To Drummond. Told him you weren't coming. What did he say? Nothing. Hasn't replied. Elena nodded. She felt lighter somehow. Unmoored, yes, but also free. What will you do now? Jace asked. She looked out at the darkening land. I don't know. I suppose I should find work in town, a hotel, maybe, or you could stay here. Elena turned to him, startled. What? You're good with the books. Better than I ever was. And you can cook, manage supplies. He stopped, cleared his throat. I'm not asking for anything improper. You'd stay in the house. I'd stay in the barn. But the work's here if you want it. Fair wages, room and board. Jace, people already talk. If I stay, they'll talk no matter what you do. His voice was steady. Question is whether you care. Elena thought about Red Ridge, Mrs. Garrison's pinched face, the station master's averted eyes, the crowd that had parted around her like she carried plague. She thought about returning there, taking some menial job, enduring whispers and judgment every day. Then she thought about this place, the quiet, the work, the man who'd pulled her off the platform and refused to let her disappear. I'd like to stay, she said quietly. Jace nodded. All right then, we'll work out the details tomorrow. They sat in comfortable silence as full dark came on. Stars appeared, more than Elena had ever seen in her life, scattered across the sky like thrown salt. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, she felt something close to hope. The next morning, Elena woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly. Jace had brought her a simple cotton dress from town, plain blue with no ornament, and stepped outside to find him reinforcing the porch railing. He looked up, wiped sweat from his forehead. Morning, coffee's on the stove. What are you doing? Rail's been loose for months. Figured if you're staying, ought to fix it. Elena felt something warm settle in her chest. I could have lived with a loose rail. I know, but you shouldn't have to. He drove another nail home with 3 sharp strikes. There's eggs and bread inside. Help yourself. She went back in, poured coffee, and stood at the window watching him work. His movements were efficient, practiced, no wasted motion. When he finished, he tested the rail with his weight, nodded in satisfaction, and gathered his tools. Inside, he washed his hands at the basin. We should talk terms. Elena set down her cup. All right. You keep the books, manage supplies, handle correspondence, cook if you want, but I can do that myself if you'd rather not. In exchange, room and board plus $30 a month. That's fair wage for the work. It was more than fair. It was generous. Jace, that's non-negotiable, he said. You do good work. You get paid for it. Simple as that. Elena nodded slowly. And the living arrangements? Like I said, you take the house. I'll stay in the barn. That's not right. This is your home. And you're a woman alone. People already talk. Let's not give them real ammunition. He leaned against the counter. Besides, barn's comfortable enough. I've slept worse places. We could partition the house, put up a wall, make 2 separate spaces. Jace considered. That'd work. I'll get lumber next time I'm in town. I'll pay for half. Elena, if we're partners in this arrangement, then we split the costs. That's fair too. He studied her for a moment, then a small smile tugged at his mouth. You're stubborn. So are you. All right, we'll split it. They shook hands, and Elena felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. It was a business agreement, nothing more. But it felt like something shifting into place. Two people figuring out how to occupy the same space without crowding each other. That afternoon, Elena walked into Redridge for the first time since the day she'd arrived. Jace had offered to drive her, but she'd refused. She needed to face the town on her own terms, standing upright. The look started before she even reached the main street. A woman gathering laundry stared, whispered something to her neighbor. Two men outside the smithy stopped talking as she passed. Elena kept her chin up, her stride steady. She had a list. Fabric for new clothes, writing paper, ink, a few personal items. The general store loomed ahead, and she pushed through the door. The shopkeeper, the same thick-middled man from the platform, looked up from his counter. His expression flickered between surprise and discomfort. "Miss Marlowe," he said carefully. "Mr. Porter." Elena set her list on the counter. "I need these items, please." Porter glanced at the list, then at her. "You're staying in the area?" "I'm working at the Callahan Ranch, keeping books, managing accounts." "I see." He began gathering items, moving slowly, like he was buying time to think. That's unusual, is it?" Elena kept her voice even. "Women keep accounts all the time." "No, I mean living out there, with Jace, alone." "Mr. Callahan lives in the barn. I live in the house. It's entirely proper." Porter said nothing, but his mouth pressed into a thin line. He wrapped her purchases in brown paper, tallied the cost. Elena paid, counted her change carefully. "Thank you," she said, and turned to leave. "Miss Marlowe," she stopped. Porter cleared his throat. "What happened to you? On the stage? That was wrong. I wanted you to know." Elena looked at him. His face was flushed, uncomfortable, but his eyes were sincere. "Thank you," she said quietly, and left. Outside, she nearly collided with Mrs. Garrison, who stood blocking the boardwalk with two other women flanking her like sentries. "Miss Marlowe," Mrs. Garrison said coolly, "I understand you've taken up residence at the Callahan Ranch." "I'm employed there, yes." "How enterprising." The word dripped with implication. "And Mr. Callahan is agreeable to this arrangement?" It was his suggestion. One of the other women, younger, with pale blonde hair, leaned in. "Surely you understand how it looks. A single woman, living with a single man. I'm living in his house. He's living in his barn. There's nothing improper about it." "Except the appearance," Mrs. Garrison said. "And in a town like this, appearance matters." Elena felt her patience crack. "Mrs. Garrison, when I collapsed on that platform, bleeding and terrified, you stood there and watched. You did nothing. Mr. Callahan helped me when no one else would. So forgive me if I don't particularly care what you think about how it looks." Mrs. Garrison's face went rigid. "How dare! I have work to do. Excuse me." Elena stepped around them and walked away, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard the women's voices rise in outraged whispers, but she didn't look back. When she reached the edge of town, she stopped, leaned against a fence post, and let out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling. She'd never spoken to anyone like that in her life. Her father had taught her deference, politeness, the art of making herself small. But she didn't feel small anymore. She felt angry, and beneath the anger, something harder and brighter, defiance. She walked the rest of the way to the ranch with her head high. Jace was in the corral, working with a young horse. He saw her approach and climbed over the fence. "How'd it go?" "I bought what I needed." Elena set down her packages. "And I told Mrs. Garrison to mind her own business." Jace's eyebrows rose. "You did?" "Not in those exact words, but close enough." A slow grin spread across his face. "I'd have paid to see that." "She wasn't pleased?" "I imagine not." He picked up one of the packages. "You all right?" Elena thought about it. "Yes, I think I am." "Good." He handed the package back. "Come on. I'll show you the ledgers for this month. We've got a cattle sale coming up, and I want your opinion on the offer." They worked through the afternoon. Elena at the table with the books spread out, Jace coming and going with questions and updates. It felt natural, easy, like a rhythm they'd been practicing for years instead of days. That evening, as they ate supper, Jace said, "I'm riding out to Devil's Bend tomorrow." Elena's fork stilled. Why? Need to look at some grazing land. Might be for sale. It was a lie. She could hear it in the careful neutrality of his tone. You're going after them, she said quietly. The bandits. Jace set down his coffee. I'm going to scout, that's all. See if they're still operating out there. And if they are, then I'll know where to find them when the time comes. Jace, Elena, those men attacked you. They're still out there, probably hitting other stages, hurting other people. Somebody needs to stop them. Why does it have to be you? Because the sheriff won't. And because I can. She wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told her it would be useless. You could get killed. I could trip over my own feet and break my neck. Life's full of risks. That's not funny. Wasn't trying to be. He leaned forward. Listen, I'm not riding in there alone and stupid. I'm just looking, gathering information. When I move, if I move, it'll be smart and careful. I promise. Elena looked at him, this man who'd turned his whole life upside down to help her. I don't want you hurt because of me. This isn't because of you. This is because what they did was wrong, and someone needs to answer for it. She knew that tone. She'd used it herself earlier, standing up to Mrs. Garrison. It was the sound of a decision already made. When will you be back? She asked. 2 days, 3 at most. He stood, carried his plate to the basin. You'll be all right here? I've been taking care of myself for a while now. I know. But if you need anything, Porter at the general store is decent enough. And Doc Pritchard'll come if you send word. I'll be fine. Jace nodded. He hesitated, then said, There's a shotgun in the cabinet by the door. You know how to use one? My father taught me. Good. Keep it loaded, just in case. The weight of those words settled over her. She'd thought the danger was past, that here on the ranch she was safe. But the world was bigger than this valley, and the men who'd hurt her were still out there. Jace left before dawn. Elena woke to the sound of his horse's hooves fading into the distance. She rose, made coffee, and stood on the porch watching the empty road. The day stretched out long and quiet. She worked on the ledgers, organized the pantry, mended a tear in one of Jace's shirts. The busy work kept her hands occupied, but her mind kept drifting to Devil's Bend, to masked men and violent intentions. By evening, she was restless. She walked down to the creek, watched the water run clear over smooth stones. The land here was so different from where she'd grown up. No soft green hills, no gentle rain. Everything was harder, sharper, demanding. But she was learning to meet it on its own terms. On the second day, a rider appeared. Elena watched from the porch as he approached. Not Jace, someone younger, wearing a deputy's badge. He dismounted, tipped his hat. Ma'am, I'm looking for Jace Callahan. He's not here. Can I help you? The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Name's Tom Brennan. Sheriff sent me to ask Mr. Callahan some questions. About what? There's been talk about you staying out here. Some folks are concerned. Elena felt heat rise in her face. Concerned about what exactly? Just the propriety of it. A woman alone with... I'm not alone with anyone. Mr. Callahan sleeps in the barn, and even if he didn't, it's none of the sheriff's business where I live or who I live with. Brennan held up his hands. I'm just delivering a message, ma'am. Sheriff wants to make sure everything's above board. Tell the sheriff everything is perfectly above board. And if he has further questions, he can come ask them himself instead of sending someone to harass me. I'm not trying to... Goodbye, Deputy Brennan. She went inside and shut the door, her hands shaking with anger. Through the window, she watched Brennan stand there for a moment, then mount up and ride away. That night, Elena lay awake thinking about Mrs. Garrison, about the deputy, about all the people so eager to judge her choices. She'd spent her whole life trying to please others, her father, her distant relatives, the society that dictated what a proper woman should be. And where had it gotten her? Shipped west like cargo to marry a stranger. Jace didn't care about propriety. He cared about what was right. And maybe that was the difference that mattered. On the third day, Jace returned. Elena heard the horse first, then saw him riding up the road. She stepped out onto the porch, relief flooding through her. He dismounted, looking tired but unhurt. Everything all right here? The deputy came. Sheriff's worried about my virtue. Jace snorted. Of course he is. Man won't chase actual criminals, but he's got time to worry about sleeping arrangements. What did you find? His expression darkened. Found them. 5 men, camped about 3 miles into the canyon. They've got a setup there. Shelter, supplies, stolen goods. Looks like they've been operating for a while. Did they see you? No, I stayed back, watched from the ridge. They're not being careful. They think they're safe out there. Elena gripped the porch rail. What are you going to do? Nothing yet. Need to think it through. He led his horse toward the barn. Right now, I need food and sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. But they didn't talk the next day because Elena woke to find Jace already gone again. This time, to town. When he returned that evening, he had the sheriff with him. Sheriff Cord Hastings was a thick-necked man in his 50s, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that gave nothing away. He sat at Elena's table, hat in his lap, while Jace laid out what he'd seen. 5 men camped in Devil's Bend, Jace said. I watched them for 6 hours. They've got a stash of stolen property, trunks, bags, strong boxes. Some of it matches what was taken off Elena's stage. Hastings scratched his jaw. You sure about that? I saw a blue trunk with brass corners. Elena, that match yours? She nodded. My mother's. It had her initials on the side. Then it's them, Jace said. You've got jurisdiction now, Cord. They're holding stolen property, and I can lead you right to them. Hold on. Hastings raised a hand. You're talking about riding into an outlaw camp with 5 armed men. I've got me and 2 deputies. That's not enough. Then deputize more men. Half the ranchers around here would ride with you if you asked. And risk getting somebody killed? No. Hastings stood. I'll send word to the territorial marshal. Let them handle it. That'll take weeks, Jace said, his voice hardening. By then, they'll be gone. Maybe, but I'm not starting a shooting war over some stolen property. It's not just property. They hurt Elena. They've probably hurt others. You're the law, Cord. Do your job. Hastings' eyes narrowed. Don't presume to tell me my job, Callahan. I'll handle this my way. Your way is doing nothing. My way is keeping this town safe. That means not charging into situations I can't control. Hastings put on his hat. You want to go after them yourself, that's your business. But don't come crying to me when it goes sideways. He left without another word. Jace stood at the window, watching him ride away. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched. He's not going to help, Elena said quietly. No, he's not. So what now? Jace turned to face her. Now I figure out how to do this without getting killed. Over the next few days, Jace changed. He became quieter, more focused. Elena would find him sitting on the porch at odd hours, staring at nothing, working through something in his head. He cleaned his rifle meticulously, checked his ammunition, mended his saddle. He was preparing for war. Elena wanted to stop him, but she understood the impulse. Those men had taken something from her, not just her belongings, but her sense of safety, her belief that the world had rules. If Jace could make them answer for that, maybe some small piece of balance would be restored. Still, she worried. One evening, she sat beside him on the porch. You can't do this alone. I know. So who'll ride with you? I've been thinking about that. There's a few men, ranchers mostly, good men who've lost stock to bandits who know what it's like when the law won't help. I can ask. And if they say no? Jace was quiet for a long moment. Then I go alone anyway. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. He looked at her. But I can't let this go, Elena. Every time I close my eyes, I see you on that platform. I see my wife's face. I can't. His voice broke just slightly. I can't stand by again. Elena understood then. This wasn't about her, not really. It was about the thing inside him that had been broken 5 years ago, the wound that had never healed. All right, she said. Then let's do it smart. They spent the evening planning. Elena pulled out maps, asked questions, forced Jace to think through contingencies. If the ranchers agreed to help, how many men? What weapons? What time of day would give them the advantage? What if things went wrong? Jace answered each question patiently, and slowly a plan took shape. The next day, he rode out to visit the neighboring ranches. Elena stayed behind, working through her anxiety by scrubbing the kitchen until it gleamed. When Jace returned that night, he looked grim. How many? Elena asked. 3. Maybe 4, if Henderson can get his son to cover the ranch. That's not enough. It's what we've got. Jace pulled off his gloves. We go in at dawn. Hit them while they're still waking up, before they're organized. Move fast. Take control. Get out. When? 2 days from now. Elena's stomach dropped. That's soon. Any later and we risk them moving camp. We've got one shot at this. She wanted to argue, to insist he wait for the marshal, for better odds, for anything that would keep him safe. But she could see the determination in his face, and she knew arguing was useless. Promise me you'll be careful, she said. I promise. He reached out, squeezed her hand briefly. I'll come back. The 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Jace and his recruits, 3 ranchers named Daniels, Moss, and Garrick, met at the ranch to plan, to coordinate, to ready themselves. Elena watched them oil their rifles, check their horses, speak in low, serious tones. The night before they were set to ride, Jace stayed up late, sitting at the table with a half-written letter in front of him. Elena sat down across from him. What's that? Instructions. In case I don't make it back. Her throat tightened. Jace, someone needs to know what to do with the ranch, with my accounts. You're the only one who understands how it all works. You're coming back. Probably, but if I don't... He pushed the letter toward her. Everything goes to you. The land, the house, the cattle. It's all written out legal. Elena stared at the paper. I can't accept that. You don't have a choice. It's done. His voice softened. You've built a life here, Elena. Whatever happens tomorrow, you deserve to keep it. She felt tears prick her eyes. This is your home. It was, but it's felt like a tomb since Sarah died. These last few weeks, with you here, it's felt like a home again. That's worth something. He stood, folded the letter. I'm leaving this with Doc Pritchard, just in case. He walked out before she could respond. Elena sat alone in his quiet house, her heart heavy. She thought about the man who'd pulled her off that platform, who'd given her safety and work and dignity. Who was about to ride into danger because he couldn't bear to let injustice stand? She went to bed but didn't sleep. When the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, she heard movement outside. Horses, low voices, the clink of metal. She dressed quickly and stepped out. The 4 men were mounted, armed, their faces set with grim purpose. Jace checked his rifle one last time, then looked up and saw her. Stay inside, he said. Lock the doors. Come back safe, Elena said. He nodded, touched the brim of his hat. Then they rode out, disappearing into the gray pre-dawn light. Elena stood on the porch, watching long after they were gone. The sun rose, spilling gold across the valley, and she whispered a prayer to no one in particular, just a desperate hope cast into the indifferent sky. Then she went inside, loaded the shotgun, and waited. The hours crawled. Elena tried to work, updating ledgers, organizing correspondence, but her hands wouldn't stay steady. She kept glancing at the window, straining for the sound of hoofbeats that never came. By midday, the silence felt like a living thing, pressing against her skull. She abandoned the books and walked outside, circling the house like a caged animal. The shotgun stayed within reach, propped against the porch rail. She tried to imagine what was happening in Devil's Bend. The plan had been simple. Approach at dawn, surround the camp while the bandits slept, force a surrender without firing a shot if possible. Clean, efficient, minimal risk. But plans had a way of falling apart when men with guns started making decisions. The sun climbed higher. Elena forced herself to eat, though the bread tasted like sawdust. She checked the horses, fed the chickens, did all the small tasks that kept the ranch running. Anything to keep moving, to keep the fear at bay. Afternoon bled into evening, still no word. She lit the lamps as darkness fell, then sat at the table with the shotgun across her lap. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, clay pigeons behind the barn, tin cans on fence posts. She'd been good at it, steady-handed and patient. But shooting targets was different from shooting men. She hoped she wouldn't have to find out how different. The night deepened. Elena's eyes grew heavy, but she fought sleep, convinced that the moment she closed her eyes would be the moment danger arrived. She made more coffee, bitter and black, and paced the room. Near midnight, she finally gave in and dozed in the chair, the shotgun still in her hands. She woke to the sound of horses. Elena jerked upright, heart hammering. Through the window, she saw shapes moving in the darkness, riders, multiple horses. She couldn't tell how many. She stood, positioned herself behind the door, and called out, "Who's there?" It's us, Jace's voice rough and tired. We're coming in. Relief nearly buckled her knees. She set down the shotgun and threw open the door. 4 horses stood in the yard. Jace dismounted first, moving stiffly. Behind him came Daniels and Moss, both looking haggard. Then Garrick, supporting another man Elena didn't recognize, younger, dressed in torn clothes, bleeding from a cut above his eye. What happened? Elena asked. Get inside, Jace said. We'll explain. They crowded into the main room. Elena lit more lamps while the men settled heavily into chairs. The stranger slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Jace pulled off his gloves. His knuckles were split and bloody. We got 3 of them. The other 2 ran. And him? Elena nodded at the injured man. That's Weaver. He was their prisoner. Weaver looked up, his face pale and drawn. They took me 2 weeks ago. Stagecoach robbery near Tucson. I thought they'd kill me. Elena fetched water and cloth, began cleaning Weaver's wound. What happened out there? Jace sat down heavily. We got to the camp just before dawn, like we planned, surrounded it quiet. I called out, told them to surrender. They came out shooting. Daniels spoke up, his voice shaky. It was chaos. They had cover, we didn't. Garrick took a bullet in the shoulder, grazed him, but he's bleeding bad. Elena turned to Garrick, who was pressing a wadded cloth against his upper arm. Blood seeped through his fingers. Let me see, she said. Garrick moved his hand. The wound was ugly, a furrow carved through muscle, deep enough to need stitches. Elena's stomach turned, but she kept her voice steady. I need to clean this properly. Jace, get the medical kit. While Jace rummaged in the cabinet, Moss continued the story. We got 2 of them right away, Cal Martinez and his brother. The one they called Snake got hit in the leg, went down hard. But the other 2 made it to their horses and bolted into the canyon. We tried to chase them, Daniels added. But the canyon's a maze. Lost them within 10 minutes. Elena worked on Garrick's shoulder, cleaning the wound with whiskey that made him hiss through his teeth. So 3 are captured, 2 are gone. Yeah. Jace set the medical kit beside her. We tied up the ones we caught, brought them to the sheriff's office. Cord wasn't happy, but he can't ignore 3 men with stolen property and a witness who'll testify against them. Will they hang? Weaver asked quietly. Probably. Territorial court doesn't mess around with armed robbery. Jace looked at Elena. We also found your trunk. It's on Moss's horse. Elena's hand stilled. My mother's trunk? The blue one with brass corners. Some of the contents are still there. Jewelry, letters. Not everything, but some. She felt tears sting her eyes. She'd thought it was gone forever, that last connection to the life she'd had before. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. 2 of them are still out there. Jace's expression was grim. And they know we came after them. They might come looking for payback. The room fell silent. Elena finished bandaging Garrick's shoulder, then moved to Weaver, stitching the cut above his eye with small, careful stitches her mother had taught her years ago. You should all stay here tonight, she said. It's too late to ride and you're exhausted. Daniels shook his head. Got to get back to my ranch. Wife will be worried sick. Same here, Moss said. But Garrick looked ready to fall over, and Weaver was in no shape to travel. Jace made the decision. Daniels, Moss, you head out. Take my gratitude with you. Garrick, Weaver, you stay. We'll figure out next steps in the morning. The 2 men left, taking their horses. Elena made up beds, Garrick in the main room on a makeshift pallet, Weaver in the barn with blankets and a pillow. Jace walked Weaver out, making sure he was settled. When he came back, Elena was washing blood from her hands at the basin. He stood in the doorway, watching her. You did good, he said. I didn't do anything. You're the one who rode into danger. You kept calm, took care of people. That matters. Elena dried her hands, turned to face him. Did you kill anyone? Jace hesitated. Yeah, one of them, Cal Martinez. He came up shooting, didn't give me a choice. Are you all right? I've killed men before during the war. It doesn't get easier, but you learn to live with it. He moved to the window, looked out at the dark yard. The 2 who got away, they're going to be a problem. How so? They'll regroup. Maybe find new partners, and they'll remember who came after them. He glanced at her. I'm worried they might come here. Fear prickled down Elena's spine. Do you really think? I don't know, but we need to be ready. Jace crossed to the gun cabinet, pulled out a second rifle. You know how to use this? I know rifles. My father had one. Good. Keep it close. And if anyone shows up that you don't recognize, you get inside, bar the door, and don't come out until you're sure it's safe. Elena took the rifle, felt its weight in her hands. What about you? I'll be watching. Won't let anything happen to you. She wanted to believe him, but the world had taught her that promises were fragile things. Still, his certainty was something to hold on to. They stood there for a moment, the rifle between them, the night pressing against the windows. Then Jace cleared his throat. Get some sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I'll rest when I know we're safe. Elena started to argue, then saw the set of his jaw and gave up. She went to the bedroom, lay down fully clothed, the rifle beside her. Sleep came in fragments, broken by every creak and rustle. Morning arrived gray and cold. Elena woke to find Jace asleep in the chair by the door, his rifle across his knees. Garrick still slept on the pallet, snoring softly. Outside, she could hear Weaver moving around the barn. She made coffee quietly, then touched Jace's shoulder. He jolted awake, hand going to his rifle before he recognized her. Easy, she said. It's just me. He relaxed, scrubbed a hand over his face. What time is it? Just past dawn. I was supposed to stay awake. You did, mostly. Elena handed him coffee. Drink this. Garrick stirred, sat up with a groan. My shoulder feels like someone drove a railroad spike through it. That's the whiskey wearing off, Elena said. I'll check the bandage after breakfast. They ate in silence. Eggs, bacon, bread. Weaver joined them, looking better in daylight despite the bruising on his face. He was young, maybe 25, with the lean build of someone who'd missed too many meals. What'll you do now? Jace asked him. Weaver shrugged. Don't know. I was heading to California when they grabbed me. Lost everything. Money, papers, all of it. You've got family there? A sister. Haven't seen her in 5 years. Jace considered. Stay here a few days, get your strength back. I'll see if I can loan you enough for passage west. Weaver's eyes widened. I can't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. Jace stood, carried his plate to the basin. Elena, you mind keeping an eye on these two while I ride into town? Need to check on the prisoners, see if the sheriff's learned anything. I'll manage. After Jace left, Elena tended to Garrick's wound, changing the bandage, checking for infection. The skin around the stitches was red, but not dangerously so. She smeared it with salve and rewrapped it carefully. You've got a steady hand, Garrick said. Done this before? My mother was sick for a long time before she died. I learned to care for her. Sorry to hear that. Elena shrugged. It was years ago, but the memory still stung. Her mother wasting away in a narrow bed, her father drinking himself numb in the next room. Elena had been 15, caught between grief and responsibility, trying to hold together a household that was already falling apart. She finished the bandage and stepped back. You should rest. Don't use that arm for anything heavy. Garrick nodded, lay back down. Elena went outside to check on Weaver, who was repairing a broken fence rail with surprising competence. You don't have to do that, she said. Need to do something. Going crazy just sitting. He drove another nail home. Besides, you and Jace helped me. This is the least I can do. They worked together in companionable silence, Weaver handling the heavy lifting, while Elena organized tools and supplies. The morning warmed, the sun burning off the early chill. Around midday, Jace returned. His face was stormy. What happened? Elena asked. The prisoners are gone. Her stomach dropped. What? Someone broke them out last night, cut the bars, walked them right out of the jail. Cord's furious, but there's nothing he can do. They're long gone by now. Elena felt cold all over. The two who escaped? Probably them, maybe others. Jace paced, his jaw tight. Cord says he's sending word to the marshal, posting notices, all the usual horse shit. But we both know those men are in the wind. Garrick appeared in the doorway, his face pale. They'll come after us, everyone who rode against them. Maybe, Jace said. Or maybe they'll run far and fast and never look back. No way to know. We should prepare like they're coming, Elena said. Better to be ready and wrong than caught unprepared. Jace looked at her, something like pride flickering in his expression. Agreed. Garrick, can you ride? If I have to. Then get home. Warn your family. Tell Daniels and Moss too. Everyone stays alert, locks their doors, keeps weapons close. He turned to Weaver. You're staying here until we know it's safe. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. You're just an extra pair of hands if trouble comes. Jace's tone left no room for argument. Elena, you and I are going to fortify this place. Board up windows, set up watch positions, make sure we've got clear lines of sight. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jace nailed planks across the windows in the bedroom and main room, leaving narrow gaps to shoot through. Elena inventoried ammunition, filled buckets with water in case of fire, moved food stores closer to the house. Weaver proved useful, working tirelessly despite his injuries. By evening, the ranch looked like a fortress, barricaded, bristling with rifles, ready for siege. Think it'll come to that? Weaver asked as they sat down to a tense supper. Hope not, Jace said. But hope isn't a strategy. That night, they took turns on watch. Jace took the first shift, then Elena, then Weaver. Each hour crawled past, every shadow suspect, every sound a potential threat. Nothing happened. The next day was the same. And the next. Tension wound tighter with each passing hour of silence. Garrick returned to report that his family was safe, Daniels and Moss likewise. No sign of the escaped bandits anywhere. On the fourth day, Sheriff Hastings rode up with news. Found them, he said without preamble, or rather, found their bodies. All 5, dead in a canyon about 30 miles south of here. Jace stared. Dead how? Shot. Looks like they had a falling out, started shooting each other. By the time we got there, they'd been dead at least 2 days. Elena felt something unclench in her chest. You're sure it's them? Positive. We identified Martinez's body, and the others matched descriptions from wanted posters. Whatever they were fighting over, it got them all killed. Jace let out a slow breath. So it's done. Looks that way. Hastings shifted in his saddle. Wanted you to know. Also wanted to say, you were right about going after them. I should have helped. Yeah, you should have. Jace's tone was flat. But at least they're gone now. Hastings nodded, tipped his hat to Elena, and rode off. The silence that followed felt different, not tense, but almost hollow. Elena looked at Jace. It's really over? She asked. Seems like it. She waited for relief to flood through her, but instead she just felt tired. I thought I'd feel different, safer maybe, or vindicated. Yeah. Jace sat down on the porch steps. Turns out revenge doesn't fix anything. It just ends things. Elena sat beside him. Do you regret it? No, they needed stopping, but I thought... He broke off, shook his head. Doesn't matter what I thought. She understood. He'd thought that confronting the men who hurt her would somehow undo the damage, would give her back what they'd taken. But trauma didn't work that way. The bandits were dead, and she was still here, still carrying the weight of what happened. At least we're safe now, she said quietly. Yeah, that's something. They sat in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Weaver emerged from the barn, saw them, and wisely retreated without speaking. After a while, Jace said, I need to take down the barricades. Get the place back to normal. I'll help. They worked together as the light faded, pulling down boards, putting tools away, restoring the house to what it had been. The work felt symbolic, rebuilding, moving forward, choosing to live instead of just surviving. When they finished, Elena stood in the main room and realized how much it had changed since she'd first arrived. There was a partition now, dividing the space into 2 separate areas, Jace's side and hers. He'd built it while she was recovering, giving them both privacy. But more than that, the house felt lived in now. Her books on the shelf, his tools by the door, shared meals at the table. It felt like a home. I'm going to wash up, Jace said. Then I'll make supper. I can cook, Elena offered. I know, but you've been working all day. Let me. She nodded, went to her side of the partition. In the small space that was now hers, she had a bed, a trunk, a chair, a washstand. Simple, spare, but enough. She washed her face and hands, changed into a clean dress. When she emerged, Jace had stew simmering and was slicing bread. They ate together, the conversation easy and meandering. Talk of cattle prices, whether to plant a garden in the spring. Weaver's planning to leave tomorrow, Jace said. Gave him money for the stage to California. He'll be all right. That's generous of you. He helped when we needed it. Fair's fair. After supper, they sat on the porch again. It was becoming a habit these quiet evenings, watching the land settle into darkness. Elena found she looked forward to it, the companionable silence, the sense of being part of something larger than herself. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. When you pulled me off that platform, did you know then that you'd let me stay?" Jace considered. "No, I just knew I couldn't walk away. Everything after that, we figured it out as we went." "Do you wish you'd left me there? Let someone else deal with it?" "No." His answer was immediate, certain. "You've been good for this place, good for me. I was just going through the motions before you came. Now it feels like I'm actually living again." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. "I feel the same way. Like I've been asleep for years, and I'm finally waking up." They sat with that confession between them, not quite acknowledgement of something deeper, but close. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. "Tomorrow we should check the north pasture," Jace said eventually. "Fence needs mending before winter." "All right, and I'll talk to Porter about that supply order. Make sure he's not overcharging us again. I already sent him a revised list. He'll have it ready by Friday." Jace smiled slightly. "You're 2 steps ahead of me." "Someone has to be." He laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. Elena realized she'd never heard him laugh before. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, less burdened. "What?" he asked, seeing her expression. "Nothing, just you should laugh more. Haven't had much to laugh about in a while." "Well, maybe that's changing." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe it is." The next morning, Weaver left for California with Jace's money and their good wishes. Elena watched him ride away, hoping he'd find his sister, hoping he'd build something new from the wreckage of what he'd lost. Then she and Jace got to work. There was fencing to mend, cattle to move, 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. They fell into an easy rhythm, Jace handling the heavy labor, Elena managing the logistics, both of them consulting on decisions that mattered. Days turned into weeks. The barricades came down completely. The rifles went back in the cabinet. Life returned to something like normal, though normal felt different now, steadier, more purposeful. Elena's belongings from the recovered trunk became small treasures scattered through her space. Her mother's locket on the washstand. A pressed flower from her childhood home between the pages of a book. Letters from friends who probably thought her dead by now. She should write to them. She knew. Let them know she was alive. Tell them where she'd ended up. But every time she sat down with pen and paper, she couldn't find the words to explain. How could she describe this life to people who'd known her as a dutiful daughter, a woman headed toward a respectable arranged marriage? How could she make them understand that losing everything had somehow led to finding herself? So she didn't write. She let the old life fade, focused on the new one taking shape around her. One evening, as she and Jace sat on the porch, their ritual now, comfortable as breathing, he said, "I've been thinking." "About?" "About making this arrangement permanent, legal." Elena's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean hiring you officially, drawing up a contract, putting it on record with the county. That way if anything happens to me, you're protected. The ranch would be yours, no question." "Jace, you don't have to." "I want to." He turned to face her. "You've earned it, Elena. You've made this place profitable, organized, running smooth. And more than that, you've made it feel like a home again. I want to make sure you're taken care of." She felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've got to survive winter first." He smiled. "And you've never seen a frontier winter. It's brutal." "I'll manage." "I know you will." They sat in comfortable silence, and Elena felt something settle inside her, a sense of belonging she'd never had before. Not in her father's house, not in the life that had been planned for her, but here, on this hard land with this quiet man, she'd found something real. The future was uncertain. Winter was coming, bringing cold and hardship. There would be more challenges, more struggles, more moments of doubt. But for the first time in her life, Elena wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. Winter arrived in late November with a vengeance that took Elena's breath away. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning, transforming the valley into something alien and beautiful. By afternoon, the wind had picked up, driving the flakes sideways in sheets of white that erased the horizon. Jace came in from checking the cattle, ice crusted in his beard. It's going to be a bad one. We need to bring the livestock closer to the barn, get them sheltered. Elena was already pulling on her heavy coat, one Jace had bought her in town, lined with wool and too big in the shoulders but warm. Tell me what to do. They worked through the afternoon, driving cattle into the protected paddocks near the barn, hauling feed from the storage shed, checking that every animal had access to water that hadn't frozen solid. The cold bit through Elena's gloves, numbed her face, made her lungs ache with every breath. By the time they finished, night had fallen and the temperature had dropped to something brutal. Inside the house, Jace built up the fire while Elena made coffee with hands that shook from cold. "You did good out there," he said, wrapping his fingers around the steaming cup. "I can barely feel my feet." "That'll pass. First winter's always the hardest." He studied her face. "You sure you want to stay through this? It's only going to get worse." Elena met his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "All right then. We'll get through it together." The storm lasted 3 days. Elena learned what it meant to be truly isolated. No trips to town, no visitors, nothing but the howling wind and the endless white. She and Jace settled into a routine: wake before dawn, tend the animals, haul water, split wood, cook, eat, sleep, then do it all again. The physical work was grueling, but Elena found she didn't mind. Her body grew stronger, her hands tougher. The soft woman who'd stepped off that stage months ago wouldn't have recognized herself now. On the third night, as they sat by the fire, Jace said, "Tell me about your father." Elena looked up from the sock she was darning. "Why?" "Just curious. You never talk about him." She set down the needle. "He was a clerk in Philadelphia. Good with numbers, terrible with people. After my mother died, he just gave up, started drinking, lost his job. We lost the house." She paused. "He arranged my marriage to Drummond to settle his debts. Died 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He did what he thought he had to, and if he hadn't, I wouldn't be here." Jace poked at the fire. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd made it to Prescott?" "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." Elena picked up the darning again. "I think I would have been miserable. Drummond wanted a housekeeper, not a wife. I would have spent my life being invisible." "You're not invisible here." She smiled. "No, I'm not." The storm broke on the 4th day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep in places, sculpted into drifts by the wind. The sky was painfully blue, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. Jace and Elena dug paths to the barn, the chicken coop, the woodpile. The work was backbreaking, but necessary. Without clear paths, the animals couldn't be tended, and without the animals, they'd starve before spring. A week later, Jace hitched the wagon, and they made the trip to town for supplies. The road was barely passable, snow-packed and treacherous. Elena gripped the seat as the wagon lurched through drifts, trusting Jace to get them through. Red Ridge looked half-buried. Snow-covered roofs, blocked doorways, piled against storefronts. People moved slowly, bundled in layers, their faces red from cold. At Porter's store, Elena noticed the stairs had changed. They were still there. The town had a long memory, but the hostility had faded to something more like curiosity. Mrs. Garrison passed them on the street and nodded curtly, which was more acknowledgement than Elena had expected. "Things are shifting," Jace observed as they loaded supplies into the wagon. "What do you mean?" "People are starting to accept that you're staying, that this isn't some scandal waiting to explode." He secured the last bag. "Doesn't mean they like it, but they're getting used to it." Elena considered that as they drove home. She'd spent months bracing for judgment, for whispers, for rejection, and all of that had happened. But she'd also kept working, kept living, kept proving that she belonged here. Maybe that was all it took, stubborn persistence in the face of doubt. December brought more storms, each one worse than the last. Elena learned to read the sky, to recognize the heavy gray clouds that meant snow, the peculiar stillness that preceded a blizzard. She learned which animals needed extra feed, which waterers froze first, how to break ice without spilling precious water. She also learned that Jace had limits he wouldn't admit to. One morning, she found him in the barn, sweating despite the cold, struggling to lift a feed sack with his right arm. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing, just stiff." But when he tried again, his face went white and he dropped the sack. Elena grabbed his arm. "Show me." He pulled back. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Show me." With obvious reluctance, he shrugged off his coat and rolled up his sleeve. His shoulder was swollen, purple with bruising that looked days old. "What happened?" "Horse kicked me 3 days ago." "And you didn't say anything?" "Didn't want to worry you." Elena felt anger flare. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What if it's broken? What if it gets infected?" "It's not broken. I can move it." "Barely." She grabbed his coat. "We're going to see Pritchard." "Elena, now, Jace, or I'll drag you there myself." He stared at her, saw she meant it, and gave in. Doc Pritchard's office was warm, cluttered with medical texts and the smell of carbolic. He examined Jace's shoulder with rough efficiency, poking and prodding while Jace gritted his teeth. "It's not broken," Pritchard said finally. "But you've got a bad bone bruise and some torn muscle. You need to rest it. No heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks." "Can't do that. Ranch won't run itself." "Then get help." Pritchard looked at Elena. "Can you handle things?" "I'll manage," Elena said. "But he needs to follow your orders." Jace started to argue, but Pritchard cut him off. "Listen to her, Callahan. You're not 20 anymore. Push too hard and you'll do permanent damage." On the ride home, Jace was silent, stewing. Elena let him brood until they were halfway back, then said, "You can't do everything alone." "I've been doing it alone for 5 years, and look where it got you. Injured and too stubborn to admit it." She kept her eyes on the road. "I'm not some delicate thing you need to protect. I can carry the weight, but you have to let me." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just rest. Let me handle things for a while." Over the next 2 weeks, Elena discovered what she was capable of. She fed the cattle, mucked the stalls, split wood, hauled water. Her muscles screamed, her back ached, and every night she fell into bed exhausted. But she did it. Every single task, without complaint. Jace tried to help at first, but she shut him down. "You rest or I tell Pritchard you're not following orders." He laughed, but he listened. By the time Pritchard cleared him to work again, something had shifted between them. Jace looked at Elena differently now, not as someone he was protecting, but as a partner who'd proven herself equal to the demands of this life. "You're tougher than I gave you credit for," he said one evening. "I'm tougher than I gave myself credit for," Elena replied. Christmas came and went with little fanfare. They had no decorations, no tree, no gifts. But Elena made a special supper, roasted chicken, potatoes, dried apple pie, and they sat by the fire, full and content. "Next year, we should do something," Jace said. "Make it feel like a holiday." "Next year," Elena agreed and realized she could see that far ahead now. A year from now, she'd still be here. That felt like certainty, not hope. In January, a rider came from town with news that shook the valley. 4 ranches to the south had been hit by raiders. Cattle stolen, buildings burned, 1 family killed. The territorial militia was forming up, and they wanted volunteers. Jace stood on the porch, reading the notice. His face was grim. "You're thinking about going," Elena said. "They need men, and I've fought before. You also have a ranch to run, and a healing shoulder. Shoulder's fine now." Elena moved closer. "Jace, you went after the bandits because of me, because of what happened. This isn't your fight. It's everyone's fight. Those raiders won't stop at 4 ranches, and the militia has plenty of men without you." He looked at her. "You want me to stay?" The question hung between them, weighted with more than just practical considerations. Elena realized what he was really asking. Did she need him here? Did his presence matter? "Yes," she said quietly. "I want you to stay. Not because I can't manage without you, but because this is your home and you've already done your part. Let someone else carry the fight." Jace folded the notice, tucked it in his pocket. "All right, I'll stay." Relief washed over her. "Thank you. But we're fortifying, just in case those raiders head north." They spent the next week preparing, checking weapons, storing extra supplies, making plans for what to do if trouble came. But the raiders never moved north. The militia caught up with them near the border, and after a brief, brutal fight, the threat was ended. life returned to the steady rhythm of winter work. Elena continued managing the books, now expanded to include detailed records of every transaction, every head of cattle, every expense. She'd turned Jace's chaotic ledger into a proper accounting system, and when she showed him the year-end summary, he whistled low. "We made money," he said, sounding surprised. "Of course we did. We're running this place efficiently now." "You're running it efficiently. I'm just doing what you tell me." Elena smiled. "Partnership means we both contribute. You know the land, the animals, the work. I know the numbers. Together, we're building something." He looked at the ledger, then at her. "Yeah, we are." February brought a thaw, false spring that melted the snow and turned the roads to mud. Elena took advantage of the break to ride into town, ostensibly for supplies, but really to test how far she'd come. She walked into Porter's store and found Mrs. Garrison there examining fabric. The older woman looked up, and for a moment, Elena braced for confrontation. Instead, Mrs. Garrison said, "Miss Marlowe, I hear you've been managing the Callahan Ranch accounts." "That's right. Porter tells me you caught him overcharging, corrected several months of errors." Elena glanced at Porter, who looked faintly embarrassed. "I did." Mrs. Garrison set down the fabric. "My husband runs a freight business. His books are a disaster. I don't suppose you'd be willing to take a look." Elena blinked, surprised. "I suppose I could." "I'd pay, of course, standard rate for bookkeeping services." It was an olive branch, however stiffly offered. Elena recognized it for what it was: acknowledgement, acceptance, a grudging admission that she'd earned her place. "I'll come by next week," Elena said. Mrs. Garrison nodded. "Thank you." When Elena returned to the ranch, Jace was mending harness in the barn. She told him about the conversation. "So you're going into business?" he asked, amused. "Might as well. I'm good at it, and people need the help." She sat on a hay bale. "Besides, it gives me a reason to go into town, make connections, build something beyond just this ranch." "I think that's smart." Jace set down the harness. "You're not just surviving anymore, Elena. You're thriving." She considered that. He was right. Somewhere in the months since she'd stumbled off that platform, she'd stopped just getting through each day and started actually living, building a life, not just enduring one. "So are you," she said. He smiled. "Yeah, I guess I am." By March, Elena was keeping books for 3 businesses in town: Mrs. Garrison's freight company, the livery stable, and Porter's general store. She rode into Red Ridge twice a week, spent hours poring over ledgers, charged fair rates, and earned a reputation for competence and discretion. The work brought in money, but more importantly, it brought respect. People who'd once whispered about her now sought her services. She was becoming a fixture in the community, not despite her unconventional arrangement with Jace, but in spite of people caring about it less and less. One evening, as she and Jace sat reviewing the month's finances, she said, "I want to expand the herd. We've got the grazing land, and cattle prices are good." Jace looked up. "That'd be a big investment." "I know, but the numbers support it. We can afford to buy 20 head, maybe 25. Within 2 years, we'd double our profits." He studied the figures she'd laid out. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure." "Then let's do it." He leaned back. "I'll ride down to Tucson next month, talk to the breeders, see what's available." "We should go together. I want to see the stock before we buy." Jace raised an eyebrow. "You know cattle now? I know enough. And I know numbers. Between the two of us, we'll make a good deal." He laughed. "All right, we'll go together." The trip to Tucson took 3 days. They rode south through country that was starting to green up with spring growth, stayed in a boarding house that was clean but spare, and spent 2 days examining cattle from various sellers. Elena discovered she had an eye for it, spotting the animals that looked healthy versus those that were just fat, asking questions about bloodlines and temperament, negotiating prices with the same skill she used on ledgers. By the end, they'd purchased 23 head at a price that made Jace shake his head in admiration. "You drove a hard bargain," he said as they headed back north, the cattle trailing behind with hired drovers. "They were asking too much. I just pointed out the market rate." "You did more than that. You made them believe they were getting a good deal even while you were cutting their price." Elena shrugged, but she felt pleased. "I learned from watching you work with people. You're honest, but you don't get pushed around. Neither do you. Not anymore. She thought about the woman who'd arrived here months ago, frightened, damaged, desperate for someone to tell her what to do. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder and surer. Someone who knew her own worth. When they got the cattle back to the ranch, Jay stood at the fence, watching them settle into the pasture. "This is good," he said. "This is really good." Elena stood beside him. "It's a start. In 5 years, we could have one of the most profitable operations in the valley." "We," Jace repeated. "You keep saying we. That's what this is, isn't it? A partnership?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, it is. I just wanted to make sure you saw it that way, too." "I do." Elena turned to face him. "Jace, I know this started as you helping me, giving me a place to recover, to figure things out. But it's become more than that. This is my home now. Your fight is my fight. Your success is my success." He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, a shift that had been building for months finally settling into place. "I'm glad you're here," he said quietly. "So am I." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky orange and gold, and Elena felt something she'd never felt before. Certainty. Not about what the future held. The future was always uncertain, but certainty that wherever it led, she could handle it. She'd proven that to herself and to everyone else who'd doubted her. Spring deepened into summer. The work changed, less about survival, more about growth. They planted a garden, repaired fences, branded the new calves. Elena's bookkeeping business expanded to include 2 more clients. The ranch showed profit 3 months running. One afternoon in June, a letter arrived from California. Elena recognized the handwriting immediately. Weaver. She opened it on the porch, Jace reading over her shoulder. The letter was short, but heartfelt. Weaver had found his sister, gotten a job at a lumber mill, was building a life. He thanked them for saving him, for giving him a second chance. He enclosed $10, partial repayment of what Jace had loaned him. "He didn't have to do that," Jace said. "He wanted to, same way you wanted to help him." Elena folded the letter carefully. Good people pay their debts, and then we're surrounded by good people, because everyone I've helped has found a way to help back. Elena thought about that. It was true. The community they'd built, however unconventional, was one based on mutual support and honest dealing. No one owed anyone everything, but everyone contributed something. In July, Elena turned 26. She didn't tell Jace. Birthdays had never been celebrations in her father's house, but he figured it out somehow. She woke to find a small package on the table, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a leather-bound journal, beautiful and expensive. A note in Jace's rough handwriting read, "For recording the things worth remembering." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She found Jace in the barn, working on a broken wagon wheel. "Thank you," she said, holding the journal. He looked up. "Figured you might want to write things down. Plans, ideas, whatever." "It's perfect." That night, she made the first entry, writing by lamplight in careful script. She recorded the date, the weather, the state of the ranch. Then, at the bottom, she added, "1 year ago, I thought my life was ending. Today, I know it was just beginning. August brought heat that baked the valley, turning the grass brown and the creeks low. They worked in the early morning and late evening, resting through the worst of the midday sun." Elena learned to move with the rhythm of the seasons, to accept that some things couldn't be forced. One evening, as they sat in the shade of the porch, Jace said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "About making this permanent. Not just the business arrangement, the whole thing." Elena's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her. "I mean marriage. Making you a legal partner, not just in name, but in law. Giving you full claim to this place, to everything we're building." She stared at him. "Is this a proposal?" "I guess it is, though not a very romantic one." He rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable. "I'm not good at pretty words, Elena, but I know what I want. I want you here, permanent. I want to build this life together, official and recognized, and I want to make sure that if anything happens to me, you're protected." Elena's mind raced. Marriage. The word carried so much weight, promises and expectations and all the baggage from the arrangement with Drummond that had nearly destroyed her. But this was different. Jace wasn't asking her to disappear into his life. He was asking her to stand beside him as an equal. "I need to think about it," she said. He nodded. "Take your time. No pressure." That night, Elena sat with the journal, trying to untangle her feelings. She'd built a life here, claimed her independence, proven she could stand on her own. Marriage felt like giving that up, becoming someone's wife instead of her own person. But when she thought about Jace, his steady presence, his respect for her abilities, the way they'd built something together, it didn't feel like losing herself. It felt like choosing to share the life she'd built with someone who valued it as much as she did. Still, she hesitated. Fear was a stubborn thing, and the scars from her father's plans ran deep. She spent 3 days thinking, weighing, examining the question from every angle. Then, on the 4th morning, she found Jace in the barn and said, "Yes." He looked up from mucking a stall. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you, on one condition." "What's that?" "We're equals in this. Full partners. My name goes on all the legal documents. I have say in every decision. This isn't you rescuing me or protecting me. It's both of us choosing to build something together." Jace set down the pitchfork. "That's exactly what I want." "Then yes." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "All right then, we'll do it right. Go to the county seat, get the license, make it legal and binding." "When?" "Whenever you want." Elena considered. "Soon, before fall work starts, before I can overthink it and get scared." "You're not scared." "A little, but I'm doing it anyway." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the courthouse in Prescott. Elena wore a new dress, dark green, practical, nothing like the torn wedding gown she'd arrived in. Jace wore his one good suit, brushed clean and smelling of mothballs. Doc Pritchard stood as witness, along with Porter and his wife. The judge read the vows, they signed the papers, and just like that, Elena Marlowe became Elena Callahan. It felt right in a way she'd never expected. Not because she'd taken Jace's name, but because she'd chosen it. Chosen him, chosen this life, chosen to stop running from what she wanted. They held a small reception at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and cake and coffee. The neighbors came, the people Elena had slowly won over through competence and persistence. Mrs. Garrison arrived with a quilted tablecloth. Porter brought a set of good china. Even Sheriff Hastings showed up, grudgingly congratulatory. As the sun set and people drifted home, Elena stood with Jace on the porch, watching the last guests ride away. "So," he said, "how does it feel, being married?" Elena thought about it. "The same, mostly, but also different, more solid, like I've put down roots that can't be pulled up." "Good roots?" "The best." He took her hand, something he rarely did, physical affection not coming naturally to him. But the gesture was warm, genuine. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing this. For choosing me. You could have gone anywhere, done anything, but you stayed." Elena squeezed his hand. "There's nowhere else I want to be." They stood together as darkness fell, two people who'd found each other through violence and chance and stubborn determination. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and full of challenges. But they'd face it together as partners, as equals, as family. The first year of marriage passed in a rhythm of work and weather, profit, and small disasters. A spring flood took out part of the north fence. Summer drought meant careful rationing of water. In the fall, cattle prices dropped and they had to hold stock longer than planned. But they weathered each challenge together, adjusting and adapting, learning that partnership meant carrying weight when the other faltered. Elena's bookkeeping business grew steadily. By the second winter, she was managing accounts for 8 businesses in Red Ridge and 2 in neighboring towns. She'd converted the small room off the main house into an office, shelves lined with ledgers, a proper desk positioned by the window for light. Jace built her that desk himself, spending evenings in the barn planing wood and fitting joints with the same care he gave to everything he made. When he carried it in and set it in place, Elena ran her hand over the smooth surface and felt something catch in her throat. "It's beautiful," she said. "Needed something sturdy. You're in there working every night." "Thank you." He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Just made sense, but she knew better. The desk was a statement, acknowledgement that her work mattered as much as his, that the life they were building had room for both their ambitions. In the spring of their second year, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, the fatigue, the nausea, the way her body felt different in ways she couldn't quite name. But she waited to be sure before saying anything, and when she finally told Jace, she was 3 months along. They were sitting on the porch, the evening cool and quiet. She said it simply, "I'm going to have a baby." Jace went very still. "You're sure?" Pritchard confirmed it yesterday. He stared out at the darkening land, his face unreadable. Elena waited, her heart hammering. They'd never discussed children, never planned for this. She didn't know what he wanted. Finally, he turned to her. "How do you feel about it?"
"Scared," she admitted. "My mother died young. I don't know if I can do this." "You can do anything." His voice was certain. "Look at everything you've already done." "That's different. This is—" She put her hand on her stomach. "This is someone else depending on me completely. What if I'm not good enough?" Jace took her hand. "You'll be good enough. Better than good enough." He paused. Do you want this?" Elena thought about the question. Did she want to be a mother? She'd never imagined it, never let herself picture that future. But sitting here now, feeling the slight swell beneath her ribs, she realized the answer. "Yes," she said. "I do." Relief washed over his face. "Then we'll figure it out. Same as everything else." The pregnancy was hard. Elena had expected that, but the reality was worse than she'd imagined. The nausea lasted well into the 4th month. Her back ached constantly. By summer, the heat made her dizzy and short of breath. But she kept working. She couldn't ride into town anymore. Jace forbade it after she nearly fainted on the road. So clients brought their books to her. She still managed the ranch accounts, still kept everything organized and running. Jace became protective in ways that both touched and irritated her. He tried to take over her chores, insisting she rest. She pushed back, insisting she wasn't fragile. "I'm pregnant, not broken," she said after he'd carried in water for the 3rd time that morning. "I know that, but you don't have to do everything." "Neither do you. We're partners, remember?" "Partners means looking out for each other." She softened. "I know, and I appreciate it. But if you start treating me like I'm made of glass, I'll lose my mind." They compromised. She'd work in the morning when she felt strongest, rest in the afternoon, do light tasks in the evening. Jace hired a young man named Sam from town to help with the heavy labor. It grated on Elena's pride, accepting help, but she recognized necessity when it stared her in the face. In August, Mrs. Garrison organized a gathering for Elena, what she called a ladies' afternoon, though Elena suspected it was just an excuse for the town women to satisfy their curiosity. She almost declined, but Jace encouraged her to go. "These are your neighbors," he said. "Might as well let them fuss over you." So Elena went, sitting in Mrs. Garrison's parlor surrounded by women offering advice she didn't ask for. But beneath the fussing, she sensed genuine goodwill. These women had watched her transformation from damaged stranger to respected community member. Now they were welcoming her into another circle, motherhood. Mrs. Garrison's daughter, Sarah, named, Elena realized with a start, after Jace's first wife, was there with her own baby, a chubby 6-month-old boy. She placed him in Elena's arms without asking. Elena held the baby awkwardly, terrified she'd drop him. He was heavier than she expected, warm and squirming. He looked up at her with solemn eyes, then grabbed her finger with surprising strength. "You'll be fine," Sarah said quietly. "It's scary at first, but you figure it out." Elena looked at this young woman, barely 20, already a mother, managing the same fears Elena carried. "Does it get easier?" "Some days. Other days you're just surviving," Sarah smiled. "But they grow fast. And then you can't imagine life without them." On the ride home, Elena thought about that baby's weight in her arms, the trust in his eyes. She thought about becoming someone's entire world, carrying that responsibility every single day. It terrified her, but beneath the fear was something else. Anticipation, maybe, or hope. September brought cooler weather and the start of harvest season. Elena worked in the garden, preserving vegetables for winter, her movements slow and deliberate. She was 7 months along now, her belly large enough that simple tasks became complicated. One afternoon, she was carrying a basket of tomatoes when her foot caught on a root. She stumbled, caught herself on the fence post, but dropped the basket.
Tomatoes rolled everywhere, splitting open in the dirt. She stood there, suddenly furious at her own clumsiness, at her ungainly body, at everything. Tears came before she could stop them. Angry, frustrated tears that had nothing to do with tomatoes and everything to do with feeling like a stranger in her own skin. Jace found her there, crying over spilled vegetables. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just gathered the tomatoes, rinsed them off, and carried the basket inside. Then he came back and sat beside her on the porch steps. "I hate this," Elena said. "I hate being slow and awkward. I hate not being able to do simple things without help. It's temporary. I know, but right now it feels permanent, like I'll never get my body back, never feel normal again." Jace was quiet for a moment. "You know what I see when I look at you? A whale?" He smiled. "I see someone strong enough to build a life from nothing. Someone who survived things that would have broken most people. Someone growing a whole person inside her body while still running a business and a ranch." He took her hand. "That's not weak, Elena. That's the strongest thing I can imagine." She leaned against his shoulder, the tears slowing. "I'm scared." "I know, so am I." That surprised her. "You are?" "Of course. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't protect you, can't protect the baby? I've already lost—" He stopped. "I can't lose you too." Elena understood then. He was carrying his own fear, haunted by the memory of Sarah dying, terrified history would repeat itself. They were both walking into this vulnerable and uncertain, hoping their strength would be enough. "We'll get through it," she said, "together." "Yeah, we will." In October, Elena went into labor 2 weeks early. It started in the middle of the night, a dull ache that grew steadily worse. She woke Jace, who immediately panicked in the way men do when faced with something they can't fix. "I'll get Pritchard," he said, already pulling on his boots. "There's time. It just started." "I'm getting Pritchard." He rode out while Elena paced the house, timing the contractions like Pritchard had taught her. They were still far apart, manageable. She had hours yet. Jace returned with Pritchard and Mrs. Garrison, who'd insisted on coming. The older woman took one look at Elena and said, "You're barely started. Might as well make coffee." So they waited. Elena paced, sat, paced again. The pain intensified gradually, waves that built and crested and receded. Jace stayed nearby, useless but present, while Mrs. Garrison and Pritchard prepared the bedroom. By afternoon, the contractions were closer together, harder to breathe through. Elena gripped the back of a chair, breathing in short gasps while Mrs. Garrison timed each one. "Getting there," the older woman said, "won't be much longer now." But it was longer, hours longer. The pain became all-consuming, erasing everything else. Elena lost track of time, of everything except the next breath, the next contraction, the relentless building pressure. At some point, Pritchard examined her and nodded. Time to push. What followed was the hardest work Elena had ever done. She'd thought she knew hard work, splitting wood in winter, hauling water, all the brutal labor of ranch life. But this was different. This was her body tearing itself apart to make way for new life, and there was nothing to do but endure it. Jace held her hand, wincing when she squeezed hard enough to bruise. "You're doing great," he kept saying, though his face was white with fear. "Shut up," Elena gasped between contractions. "Don't talk." He shut up. Time blurred. Push, rest, push again. The pain was enormous, obliterating. Elena thought she might die. She thought dying might be easier. Then Pritchard said, "Heads out, one more push." Elena bore down with everything she had left, and suddenly there was release, a rush of sensation, and then a baby's cry filling the room. "It's a girl," Pritchard said, holding up a tiny, blood-streaked creature who was screaming furiously. "A healthy girl." Elena collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure. Pritchard cleaned the baby, wrapped her in a blanket, and placed her in Elena's arms. She was perfect. Impossibly small, red-faced and angry, but perfect. Elena stared at her daughter's face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in protest, and felt something shift fundamentally inside her. "She's beautiful," Jace whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby grabbed onto him and his face crumpled. "She's so small." "She's strong," Elena said. "Listen to those lungs." The baby continued crying, and Elena instinctively brought her to her breast.
After a moment of fumbling, the baby latched on, and the crying stopped. The room fell quiet except for small suckling sounds. Mrs. Garrison cleaned up efficiently, then squeezed Elena's shoulder. "You did well, both of you." After she and Pritchard left, Elena and Jace sat together in the growing darkness, watching their daughter nurse. The lamplight was soft, the house quiet. Outside, the ranch continued, cattle lowing, wind in the cottonwoods, the endless rhythm of the land. "What should we name her?" Jace asked. Elena had thought about this. She looked down at the baby's face, at the determination in her tiny features even as she slept. "Grace," she said, "for the grace we were both given, the second chance we got." Jace nodded. "Grace Callahan. I like it." The first weeks with Grace were brutal. The baby woke every 2 hours, crying for food or comfort, or for no reason Elena could determine. Elena stumbled through the days exhausted, her body still recovering, her mind foggy with lack of sleep. Jace tried to help, but there was only so much he could do. He took over all the outdoor work, hired Sam for longer hours, brought Elena food and water and clean clothes. But the baby needed her mother, and Elena found herself trapped in a cycle of feeding and changing and trying to catch moments of sleep between cries. She'd thought pregnancy was hard. This was harder. One night, after Grace had been crying for 3 hours straight, and nothing Elena did seemed to help, she finally broke. She handed the baby to Jace, walked out onto the porch, and stood in the cold November air, shaking with exhaustion and frustration. Jace came out a few minutes later, Grace quiet against his shoulder. She finally settled. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," Elena said. "I feed her, change her, hold her. Nothing works." "You're not doing anything wrong. Babies just cry sometimes." "I feel like I'm failing, like I'm not cut out for this." Jace shifted Grace to his other arm. "You want to know what I think? I think you're exhausted and scared and being too hard on yourself. Same as when you first got here and thought you couldn't handle ranch work." "That was different." "Not really. You doubted yourself then too, and you proved yourself wrong." He looked at the baby. "Give it time. You'll figure this out the same way you figure everything else out." Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt sat heavy in her chest. Still, she kept trying, and slowly, so slowly, things got easier. Grace started sleeping longer stretches. Elena learned to read her cries, to distinguish hunger from tiredness, from simple crankiness. Her body healed, the fog lifted. By December, they'd found a rhythm. Grace would sleep for 4 hours at a stretch, wake to nurse, then sleep again. Elena could work in the mornings while the baby napped, tend to her in the afternoon, hand her to Jace in the evenings so she could finish the day's accounts. It wasn't perfect. Some days were still hard, but they managed. Winter came again, and Elena found herself navigating motherhood and snow at the same time. She learned to strap Grace to her chest while doing chores, to nurse while reviewing ledgers, to sleep when the baby slept no matter what time of day. One evening, as she sat by the fire with Grace in her arms, Jace said, "You're good at this." Elena looked up, surprised. "At what?" "Being a mother. I know you don't feel like it, but you are." She looked down at Grace, who was drifting off to sleep, her small fist clutched around Elena's finger. "I'm just doing what needs doing." That's what being good at it means. Maybe he was right. Maybe competence wasn't about having all the answers or never struggling. Maybe it was just about showing up every day, doing the work, refusing to quit even when things got hard. Spring arrived, and with it came the second year of Grace's life. She started crawling, then pulling herself up on furniture, then taking wobbly steps. Every milestone felt enormous, proof that Elena had kept this small person alive and growing. The ranch continued to prosper. The expanded herd produced well. Elena's bookkeeping business remained steady. They saved money, made improvements, built toward a future that looked more stable with each passing season. In the summer, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Elena almost didn't open it. She'd left that life behind, wanted nothing to do with it. But curiosity won out. The letter was from a distant cousin she barely remembered, informing her that her father's debts had finally been settled. The house had been sold, the creditors paid. There was a small amount left over, $300, that belonged to Elena as sole heir. She stared at the bank draft, thinking about the man who'd arranged her marriage to settle those same debts. He'd failed at almost everything. Her father failed at his job,
at sobriety, at being the person his family needed. But in the end, his debts were paid, and the money that remained had found its way to her. "What will you do with it?" Jace asked when she showed him. Elena thought about it. $300 could buy a lot. More cattle, new equipment, improvements to the house. But looking at Grace playing on the floor, watching the life they'd built together, she knew what she wanted. "I want to start a fund," she said, "for Grace's education, so she never has to depend on anyone else, never has to marry for security. She'll have choices we didn't have." Jace nodded slowly. "I like that." They put the money in a bank in Prescott, designated for their daughter's future. It felt like closing a circle, the wreckage of Elena's old life transformed into possibility for the new one. The years passed, each one adding layers to the life they'd built. Grace grew into a sturdy, curious child who followed Jace around the ranch and studied numbers with her mother. A second child came, a boy they named Thomas, and the house that had once felt too large for two people became full of noise and life. Elena's hair started showing gray at the temples. Jace's shoulders grew stiffer in the mornings. They weren't young anymore, but they were solid, rooted in the land and in each other in ways that felt permanent. On a cool evening in October, 6 years after Elena had first arrived in Red Ridge, she and Jace sat on the porch watching Grace and Thomas chase fireflies in the yard. The children's laughter carried on the wind, bright and uncomplicated. "You ever think about how we got here?" Elena asked. "Sometimes." Jace stretched his legs out. "Still seems unlikely. All the things that had to happen for us to end up in the same place." Elena thought about it. The bandits, the stage robbery, collapsing on the platform. Every terrible thing that had led her to this moment. "I wouldn't change it," she said quietly. "Not any of it." "Not even the hard parts?" "Especially not the hard parts. They made me who I am." Jace looked at her and she saw understanding in his eyes. He knew about hard parts, about loss and grief, and the long climb back to living. They'd both walked through fire to get here. "The thing is," Elena continued, watching her children play, "I spent so long thinking I needed rescuing, that someone would come along and fix my life, make everything better. But that's not how it works." "No?" "No. We save ourselves. We do the work, make the choices, build the life we want piece by piece. Other people can help." She took his hand. "But the saving part, that's on us." Jace squeezed her fingers. "When'd you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just paying attention." She smiled. "You know what I've learned? The wilderness doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care if you're scared or unprepared or broken. It just is, and you either adapt to it or you die." Cheerful thought, but true. And the adapting, that's where you find out who you really are. Not who you thought you were, or who other people wanted you to be, the real you, underneath everything else. Thomas came running up, holding a firefly cupped in his small hands. "Mama, look!" Elena looked. The insect glowed softly, pulsing light in the darkness of her son's palms. "Beautiful. Now let it go." Thomas opened his hands and the firefly drifted upward, joining its companions in their ancient dance. The boy ran off again, chasing another. "They're good kids," Jace said. "They are. But they'll have hard times too. Everyone does. You'll teach them to handle it." Elena thought about that. What would she teach her children? Not to avoid difficulty, that was impossible. Not to wait for rescue, that was foolish. But maybe to face challenges with courage, to trust their own strength, to understand that broken things could be rebuilt into something even better than before. "I'll teach them what you taught me," she said. "That it's okay to be scared as long as you keep moving. That asking for help isn't weakness. That the work matters more than how you feel about doing it." "I didn't teach you that. You already knew it." "No, I learned it. From watching you, from living this life." She looked at him. "You gave me the chance to discover what I was capable of. That's the real gift. Not rescue. Opportunity." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the children's games wound down. Grace caught one more firefly, studied it seriously, then released it. She was so much like Elena, determined, careful, smart. Thomas was pure energy, all impulse and enthusiasm. Different children, different challenges ahead. But both of them growing up knowing they were loved, knowing they had value beyond what they could provide for someone else. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Elena sat at her desk, the one Jace had built, and opened her journal. She'd been keeping it faithfully for years now, recording the daily details of their life, the small victories and setbacks that added up to a whole existence. She wrote about the children's games, about the ranch's accounts, about the quiet satisfaction of another year survived and thrived. Then, at the bottom of the page, she added something else. There's a story people tell about the frontier that it's a place where you can reinvent yourself, become someone new. That's partly true. But it's not the land that changes you. It's the work. The daily choosing to show up and try again, even when everything hurts. The refusal to quit when quitting would be easier. I came here broken, and I thought the breaking defined me. But it didn't. What defined me was what I built from the pieces. Not just this ranch or this business or even this family, though all of those matter. What I built was a self I could live with, a person I wasn't ashamed to be. That's what the wilderness teaches you, if you're paying attention. That you're stronger than you think, that survival isn't about avoiding damage, it's about keeping going despite it. And that the life you build with your own hands, imperfect and hard-won, is worth more than any perfect thing handed to you fully formed. She closed the journal and sat back, looking around the small office. Through the window, she could see the dark shape of the barn, the fence posts marching into shadow, the vast sky overhead. This land had been harsh and unforgiving, but it had also been honest. It demanded everything, gave nothing for free, and rewarded those who learned to meet it on its own terms. She thought about this woman who'd stumbled off that platform 6 years ago, terrified, ashamed, convinced her life was ending. If she could speak to that woman now, what would she say? Probably nothing that would make sense. You couldn't explain the journey to someone who hadn't walked it. You couldn't describe strength to someone who didn't know they possessed it. All you could do was survive each day, make each choice, take each step. The understanding came later, looking back at the distance traveled. The next morning, Elena woke to Grace shaking her shoulder. "Mama, the chickens got out." She groaned, pulled herself from bed. Another crisis, another problem to solve. 6 years in, and ranch life still threw curveballs. But as she headed outside, Jace already up and chasing chickens, Thomas helping by running in circles and laughing, she felt something she'd never expected to feel. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, because happiness came and went like weather. But contentment, the deep satisfaction of a life well lived, built on honest work and real connection. They caught the chickens. Grace helped count to make sure none were missing. Thomas got pecked and cried for 5 minutes before forgetting about it completely. Jace fixed the section of fence that had broken overnight. Just another morning on the ranch. Just another day in the life they'd chosen. And that, Elena thought as she watched her family work together, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The story could end there, neatly, completely, with lessons learned and stability achieved. But life didn't work that way, and Elena knew it. There would be more hard times ahead. Droughts and floods, sickness and injury, the 1,000 ways the world could break what you'd built. Grace and Thomas would grow up and face their own challenges. The ranch would demand constant vigilance. Nothing was guaranteed, but they'd keep going anyway. That was the real lesson, the one that mattered most. Not that you could overcome anything, or that hard work always paid off, or any of the simple stories people told themselves. But that you could keep choosing to show up, keep trying, keep building, even when the outcome was uncertain. Because the alternative, giving up, surrendering to fear, letting the world dictate your worth, that was worse than any hardship the frontier could throw at you. Elena had learned that on a dusty platform in Red Ridge, when a stranger had refused to let her disappear. She'd learned it through months of pain and doubt and slow rebuilding. She'd learned it in winter storms and summer heat, in ledgers and cattle sales, and 1,000 small decisions that added up to a life. And now she was teaching it to her children, not through words, but through example, showing them that women could own land, manage businesses, make their own choices, showing them that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about getting back up, showing them that family was something you built, not something you were born into, a choice, renewed every day. That was the truth the wilderness had taught her, the one she'd carry forward into whatever came next. Years later, when Grace was grown and asking her mother about those early days, Elena would struggle to find the right words. How could she explain what it felt like to lose everything and discover that nothing was actually lost? How could she describe the transformation from victim to survivor,
to someone who'd stopped defining herself by what had happened to her.
In the end, she'd say something simple. I learned that I was enough. Not perfect, not undamaged, but enough. And once you know that, really know it, nothing can take it away from you. Grace would nod, understanding in the way children of the frontier understood. They grew up hard, those children, but they grew up knowing their own worth. And that was worth more than all the security and comfort and perfect plans in the world. The sun set over the ranch, painting everything gold. In the house, dinner cooked while children laughed and argued. At the desk, ledgers waited. In the barn, animals settled for the night. The land stretched away in all directions, harsh and beautiful and endlessly demanding. Elena stood on the porch, watching it all, and felt the weight of gratitude. Not for an easy life, she'd never had that. But for a real one, a life built on honest work and hard choices and the stubborn refusal to quit when quitting would have been simpler. Jace came up beside her, quiet as always. They stood together as the light faded, two people who'd found each other through chance and violence and decided to make something lasting from it. You all right? He asked. Elena smiled. Yeah, I am. And she meant it. After everything, the loss, the fear, the brutal work of rebuilding, she'd arrived at something resembling peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the confidence that she could handle whatever came next. The wilderness had tested her. She'd survived the testing, and in surviving, she'd discovered who she really was. That was enough. It would always be enough.